Hi, I'm Caddy. Stay with me. Sophie lost her family because of one lie. Her sister said she dropped out of medical school. They believed her. 5 years later, she walked into their lives again.
Before you continue, I need you to do one thing for me. Stop. Breathe. Because what I'm going to tell you today isn't just a story. It's one of those accounts that stick with you. That makes you think about your own family. About the silences you swallowed. About the times you were the smallest in the room, not because you were smaller, but because someone needed you to be. Stay with me until the end. Because this story begins with an accusation of fraud and ends with a 240,000 reais surgery. And between those two moments, there are 3 years of silence that will break you in two. Her name was Sophia Reyes, and since Sophia had any memory, there was an undeclared hierarchy within the Reyes family home, one of those invisible laws that no one writes down and everyone obeys. Her older brother, Marcos, was the firstborn, the name that the father pronounced with a different weight, the son who entered the room and made the air change. Marcos was 31 years old and had the specific talent of looking like he was about to do something great without ever actually doing it. He had charisma. He has stories. He had the kind of energy that convinces people that next week will be different, that the next project will be the project. He had debts, 3 dissolved partnerships, and a history of loans that the Reyes family had discreetly covered over the years without ever uttering the word failure aloud. Because in certain families, the failure of a favored child is called a phase. The success of a troublesome daughter is called luck. Sophia was 26 years old when she founded Nexera Smart Logistics, platform for small and medium-sized businesses. The kind of solution that seems obvious after someone creates it and impossible to see before. She spent 18 months sleeping 4 hours a night, eating poorly, arguing with investors who doubted a young woman in an industry dominated by men in ties and banking backgrounds. She heard no more times a week than most people hear in a year. And she kept going, not out of stubbornness exactly, out of an unwavering faith in what she had built, the faith that only exists when you know the product better than any investor ever could. When you've spent nights fixing code and rewriting pitch decks for the 12th time, because the 11th wasn't right yet. She didn't ask her family for help. Not because she was proud, but because she had learned, slowly and with great emotional cost, that the currency in that house was approval, and that approval was something her father distributed with a selectivity she had never been able to fully decipher. She built Nexera alone, with 2 partners who believed in her, seed capital that took 8 months to secure, and a resilience that no one in the family knew she possessed because no one had been paying attention. Then came the day. Sophia was at the airport, carry-on bag on the floor, coffee in hand, rereading the terms of a contract for the 3rd time because she was the kind of person who reread contracts for the 3rd time when the phone rang. New York Urban Accelerator, 80 startups applied, 12 selected. 4-month program, mentorship from senior executives. Exposure to venture capital funds investing in Series A and B rounds. It was the kind of thing that didn't happen to companies the size of Nexera. Or it did, but rarely, and only to those that had built something that couldn't be ignored. Sophia stood in the middle of the lobby and read the email twice. Then she put her phone in her pocket. She picked up her bag. She walked to the window overlooking the runway and stared at the planes for a full minute. She didn't call any partners first. She called her father. Because no matter how much independence we build and how much we learn to be self-sufficient, there is a child in almost every human being who still wants their father to know when they've done something worthwhile. It's a primitive, inconvenient, and completely human impulse. Rodrigo Reyes answered the second ring. She told him. In the most controlled voice she could muster, she talked about the program, about New York, about what it meant for Nexera, about the growth numbers that had made it possible. There was a pause on the other end of the line. And then her father said something Sophia had waited her whole life to hear. "I knew you'd get there, daughter. daughter. Pronounced with that different weight. The way she had always seemed reserved for Marcus's name. She hung up the phone. She boarded the plane. She cried silently in seat 14C for approximately 3 minutes and 40 seconds, her face turned toward the window. In the most discreet way possible for tears that need to happen but don't need witnesses. That moment was real. She will keep it forever. What came after almost erased it entirely. Marcos had observed everything. He had observed when his father began mentioning Sophia in conversations with a different tone. He had observed when his mother started asking questions about Nexera with that specific glint in her eyes that signifies pride. He had observed the dynamics of that house, which he had comfortably dominated for years, begin to tilt, inch by inch, toward his sister. And Marcos was many things: irresponsible, scattered, eternally in the process of starting something. But he wasn't stupid. He understood what was happening. And he knew, with the precision of someone who has spent years studying the emotional mechanisms of that family, exactly where to press. 2 months after the airport call, while Sophia was in New York absorbed in the program, her parents' phones rang. It was Marcos. He had proof. Emails, screenshots, documents with Sophia's name, with the Nexera logo, with enough numbers and technical language to seem credible. To people who didn't understand the industry, but who loved the son who was presenting the material. Emails suggesting that Sophia had embezzled funds, that she had deceived investors, that the New York program had been won with false information. Fraud, the word that destroys reputations. That makes families retreat. That transforms the pride of 2 months ago into retroactive shame. Rodrigo Reyes read the documents at the kitchen table, with Marcos sitting beside him explaining each point, and something clicked inside him like a window that slowly closes and unlocks. He didn't call Sophia to ask. He didn't send the documents to any lawyer, any accountant, any knowledgeable person to verify. He didn't ask any of the questions a person asks when they want to know the truth, instead of confirming what they already decided to believe. He believed his son. Because it was easier. Because Marcos was there at the kitchen table, eye to eye. Because Sophia was in New York being successful in a way that no one had taught her. In a sector that no one in the family understood. And inexplicable success sometimes seems suspicious to those who have never seen firsthand how it is built. And because, deep down, there was a part of Rodrigo Reyes that had always hoped Sophia was too big to be true, Sophia found out by chance. She called her mother on a Thursday night. After a mentoring session that had gone exceptionally well, and the call went straight to voicemail. She texted. Nothing. She called her father, number blocked. She stared at her phone screen for a time she couldn't exactly measure, but which felt very long. Then she called a cousin, who answered with a strange voice, that voice of someone who knows something and doesn't know if they should tell. And then, in pieces, with the uncomfortable delicacy of someone conveying an explosion in slow motion, the cousin told her. The accusations, the documents, what Marcos had shown. What the family had concluded. The fact that the matter had already circulated uncles, cousins, people Sophia saw at holiday parties who now knew a version of her story that she had unauthorized and that wasn't true. Sophia hung up the phone. She walked to the window of the apartment she had rented in Brooklyn for the 4 months of the program. She stared at the street for a while. And then she did something that will seem surprising. She didn't go back. She didn't board the first plane. She didn't call her furious father demanding an explanation. She didn't send the documents proving Marcos's fraud to the whole family in a group email at 2 in the morning. She went back to her laptop. She opened the product deck she was preparing for the presentation the following week. And she worked until midnight, not because she wasn't broken inside, she was, but because she had learned, before anything else about business or leadership, that you can't make the most important decision of your life at its worst emotional moment. And because she knew, with the cold clarity that pain sometimes produces, that the only answer that mattered wasn't verbal. It was Nexera. 3 years. 1095 days of family silence. Not the silence of someone who gave up. The silence of someone building something so large there's no energy left to fight. Sophia came back from New York with 2 new contracts, a pre-Series A investment round practically closed, and a version of herself that had been tested in a fire most people never face, not the fire of the market, but the fire of discovering that the people who were supposed to be your safety net chose to be the hard floor instead. She hired. She expanded. She made mistakes and corrected them, and made different mistakes and corrected those better. She built a culture at Nexera that reflected everything she had learned about what it feels like to be underestimated. A culture of real merit, of genuine listening, of space for the people who do the work no one sees, but that holds everything else up. At 28, Nexera closed a Series A round of $22 million. Not a single member of the Reyes family was invited to the celebration dinner. Not out of resentment, Sophia has spent those 3 years building a version of herself that understood the difference between resentment and boundaries. She hadn't excluded them because she wanted to hurt them. She had kept the distance because she had learned that some people can only see you when you stop needing them. She was learning not to need them. At 29, she became CEO. A business magazine published a profile on her, half a page, photo in a conference room, subtitle, The Silent Builder. Some relatives saw it and forwarded it to the family group chat without a comment. Nobody replied. She didn't find out about it for months. When she did, she processed the information for about 45 seconds and went to her next meeting. She had a lot to do. It was 2:23 in the morning when the phone rang. Sophia woke up with her heart pounding. That immediate state of alert that belongs to people who have learned that calls at this hour are rarely good news. She looked at the number on the screen, unfamiliar. An area code she didn't recognize. She answered. Belo Jardim State Hospital. Emergency Department. Rodrigo Reyes had been in a car accident on the highway. Cranial trauma. Internal bleeding. He was in emergency surgery. They needed a family member with authority to make medical and financial decisions, and the emergency contact on his file was Marcos. But Marcos had said he had no ability to authorize anything financially, and he had given them Sophia's name. She lay in the dark for exactly 10 seconds after hanging up. Then she got up, called the airline, bought the first available flight, leaving at 4:40 in the morning, packed in 12 minutes, called a car. On the way to the airport, she looked out the window at the city still dark outside and thought one simple thing: he is my father, not, they deserve my help. Not, now they'll learn their lesson. Not, now they'll finally see. Just, he is my father. Sometimes, the most complex thing a person carries is also the simplest to name. She arrived at 6:42 in the morning. The hallway smelled like what hospital hallways smell like, disinfectant and anxiety, and the specific tension of people waiting for news that hasn't arrived yet. Sophia walked to the reception desk with her carry-on still in her hand, asked for her father's name, and was directed to the surgical wing. She saw her mother first. Luisa Reyes was sitting in a plastic chair with her hands in her lap and eyes that gave away a sleepless night and a cry that had already happened and perhaps hadn't fully ended yet. She looked up when Sophia arrived, and what crossed her face was a sequence of things Sophia will remember for a long time. Recognition, then relief, then shame, then relief again, defeating the shame. Marcos was standing on the other side of the hallway, phone in hand. When he saw Sophia, he went completely still. There were other relatives, an aunt, a cousin. Everyone looked. Nobody spoke for a moment that lasted longer than it should have. Sophia walked past all of them, reached her mother, and crouched down to her eye level. "How is he?" she asked. And Luisa Reyes grabbed her daughter's hands and began to cry in a different way, the cry of someone who had been holding something and could no longer hold it. While her mother spoke, Sophia listened. About the accident. About the severity. About the surgery that was needed, specialized, the kind the state hospital couldn't perform with the resources available. Transferred to a private clinic, specific equipment, estimated cost, 240,000 reais. Partial payment required before admission. The silence that filled the hallway after that number had weight to it. That was when Sophia looked toward the far end of the corridor and noticed something no one had mentioned. A plaque, blue with gold letters. Wing of Technology and Innovation in Health, sponsored by Nexera. She had funded the renovation of that wing 18 months earlier, part of a social responsibility program Nexera had launched in 3 cities. She had never imagined that one day she would walk into that hallway for a personal reason. The hospital where her father was being treated existed, in part, because of the daughter the family had decided to cut off. She said nothing about it. She kept that information in the place where you keep ironies too large to be commented on. She found Marcos by the coffee machine. He had his back to her, and she approached him slowly, cautiously. When he finally turned around and saw her standing there, barely a meter away, she saw something flicker across his face. It wasn't anger. It wasn't defiance. No, it was something much smaller than that. Something that just contracted. It was a look of quiet, sudden realization. Original emails, their headers intact. Metadata, with every timestamp perfectly preserved. A full technical analysis, compiled by a digital forensics firm she had quietly hired 6 months after he blocked her. She hadn't hired them to use the information immediately. No, she did it because she understood something fundamental. One day, the truth would need documentation. It would need proof. You know what this is, she said. Her voice was steady even. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. Marcos glanced down at the phone's screen, his eyes scanning the damning evidence. Then, he looked back up at her. And here is what Sophia will tell you about that precise moment, if you ever get the chance to ask her. She didn't feel rage. She had already burned through the rage stage a long, long time ago. That fire had consumed her in a solitude of anonymous work apartments in different cities, late at night. It had woken her up in the lonely early mornings. When you have to process the world by yourself because there is no family you can call. What she felt, looking at her brother standing in that sterile hospital hallway, was something much closer to profound exhaustion. It was the exhaustion of someone who has carried a lie that was uneven hers for 3 long years. A burden she was never meant to bear. I'm not going to do this publicly, she said. But you are going to tell them. Today, you will tell them what you did, and you will tell them why you did it. But she cut him off before he could even begin. I have already spent more than enough time speaking to people who weren't listening. Now it's your turn. And in that moment, the power shifted. It was his. The weight she had carried for so long was finally set down right there on the shelf of the coffee machine, next to the undeniable truth on the screen. The story of what happens next is not about revenge, but about reclamation. It is about taking back a narrative that was stolen and the quiet strength it takes to finally make things right. The most powerful thing you can do is to simply stop talking and let the truth speak for itself. Thank you for watching, and if this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing for more content like this. We'll see you in the next one. She picked up her phone and walked back to the hallway. Luisa Reyes, her mother, asked for help with the voice of a woman who knows the monumental size of what she is asking. She took Sophia's hands again, standing in that same sterile hallway, with the same relatives watching from a distance, just as they had watched her leave 3 years ago. With an honesty that must have cost her a great deal, Luisa said, I know we have no right to ask. But he is in there, and I don't know what to do. Sophia stood still for a moment, the world slowing down around her. She was the kind of person who processes life in layers, and in that single moment, a flood of memories and thoughts washed over her. She thought about her father at the airport 3 years ago. His voice full of a pride she had craved her whole life, saying, I always knew you'd get there, daughter. a pride that came only after she had already left, after she had succeeded on her own terms. Then, her mind jumped to the documents Marcos, her brother, had created. The forged papers, the lies he had spun to hide his own failures. The very lies that had fractured their family and cast her out. She thought about the 1,095 days that had passed, 3 full years. 3 years without a single phone call, without one text message, without a single person in that family who had ever doubted the narrative enough to just ask her side of the story. They had accepted the lie, and in doing so, had erased her. And then, a final, simple, undeniable thought broke through the noise. But he is my father. It's crucial to understand what happened next. She did not pay for the surgery for them. She did not open her wallet to buy back a place at the family table, a seat she had been forced to vacate. She did not pay to prove she was finally good enough, to show them the success they had never believed she could achieve. She did not pay so that someone would feel indebted to her forever, or so that the family legend would be rewritten to "Sophia saved us all" at every future holiday gathering. No, she paid for a much simpler and much more profound reason. She paid because she is the kind of person who pays. Over those 3 years of silence and distance, she had meticulously built a new version of herself. A version forged not in the fires of resentment or bitterness, but in the quiet strength of self-respect. This new Sophia made decisions based on who she wanted to be, not on who had hurt her and by how much. And the person she wanted to be, the person she had worked so hard to become, was not someone who would stand by a hospital bed and start calculating who deserved what. She would not let the pain of the past dictate the compassion of her present. Her father was in need. That was the only variable that mattered. So, she picked up her phone, her movements calm and deliberate. She called the CFO of Nexera, the company she had built from the ground up. She gave the instruction, her voice steady. The money, a sum that would have once been unimaginable to her, was a simple transaction now. The transfer was confirmed in 40 minutes, a problem solved. It was Marcos who told them. He didn't do it elegantly. There was no grace in his confession, no carefully worded apology. He just told them. With Louisa present, with their aunt listening, he laid out the truth with enough clumsy detail for the entire elaborate lie he had constructed to collapse in on itself, in a way that could not be denied or swept under the rug. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with 3 years of unspoken truths. Luisa Reyes, her mother, stayed silent for a very long time after that. She just stared, not really at Sophia but through her, as if replaying the last 3 years in her mind. Then, finally, her gaze focused, and she looked at her daughter. All she said was, "I should have asked." Just 4 words. 4 words to bridge a chasm of pain and misunderstanding. It was insufficient, of course. How could it not be? It was a drop of water in a desert of hurt. But it was also true. It was the truest thing her mother had said to her in years. And sometimes, the truth, however small, is where healing begins. Sophia didn't respond. She just nodded, a silent acknowledgement. The money was sent. The truth was out. Her father would get the care he needed. For the first time in a long time, the path forward, while not easy, was at least clear. She had acted not out of obligation to them, but out of loyalty to herself. And in doing so, she had found a peace that no apology or family reunion could ever provide. She had become the person she was always meant to be. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing for more content that explores the complex, beautiful, and powerful journeys we all take. See you in the next one. She did not say everything was fine because it wasn't, and she had stopped saying everything was fine when it wasn't somewhere around the age of 25. She did not embrace her mother with the effusiveness of a made-for-TV reconciliation. Without performing forgiveness that hadn't happened yet, and without denying the connection that had never fully disappeared. Rodrigo Reyes survived the surgery. 2 weeks later, when he was conscious and stable, Sophia went to visit him. Alone, without telling anyone. She walked into the room, pulled the chair close, and sat beside the bed. He looked at her for a long time without speaking. Then he said, his voice still weak, "You came." "I did," she said. "Why?" She thought for a moment. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. They did not resolve 3 years in 90 minutes. Nobody does, that is not how life works. But they began something. Something honest and uncomfortable and real, which is the only foundation on which anything true can be built. Nexura operates across 11 states. 140 employees. And when she speaks to young women about the hardest moment of her journey, she doesn't talk about an investor who said no. She talks about a hospital hallway at 6 in the morning. And about the moment she chose to pay, not because they deserved it, but because she deserved to be the kind of person who pays. There is one thing I need you to take from here. It is arriving in a hospital hallway, 3 years after being destroyed by your own family, and knowing exactly who you are. Not being controlled by their pain. Not being defined by the false version of you that they built. The most elegant revenge is looking at the plaque on the hospital wall with your company's name on it, and not needing to say a word, because the work speaks. The work always speaks. Sophia did not defend herself publicly when she was accused. No posts, no threads, no group messages. She knew something that took me a while to understand too. When you are innocent and have proof, time is your ally. So if there is someone in your life right now who is doubting you, who is telling a story about you that is untrue, who is using the credibility they have with the people you love to diminish what you are building, I need you to hear this. You do not need to defend yourself louder than you are building. Build. Build with such care, with such honesty, with such relentless work, that when the lie finally falls, and it always falls, its weight is unsustainable in the long run, what is left standing speaks for you. Be the plaque on the wall. Be the transfer confirmed in 40 minutes. Be the person who walks into the room even without being invited. Because that is who you decided to be, not because anyone deserved it, but because you deserve to be that person. Stay with me, Katie, and build.